Good day, duelists. This is Ballom, Master of Death, one of the most iconic Duel Masters cards ever printed, and without a doubt, Kid Bazat's #1 favorite card. And I mean by far. In fact, one of my email addresses that I made way back when and that I still use to this day is ballommasterofdeath12000 @yahoo.com, just to get a sense for how much this card meant to me. Unfortunately, this card has not seen much competitive success in the Duel Masters TCG. No, scratch that, that's an understatement. Ballom Master of Death was viewed by many as a meme-level bad card. And yet despite that, I set out on an impossible mission to bring Ballom to the main stage. I wanted to make a deck that was not just junk level sort of playable, but actually good. I wanted to make a deck that could stand up proudly and claim its rightful place among Duel Masters' greatest, and I'm happy to say, I actually did it. This is the list right here. A list I brought to the 49th edition of the International Duel Masters Cup, a 30-person online tournament in arguably the most competitive English Duel Masters environment today, and I placed first after Swiss stage and third place overall after regrettably losing the semifinals against the tournament winner. I will be posting a tournament rundown so you can see all the crazy moments of Ballom in action, but in this video I want to focus on the deck itself and talk a little bit about it. But before we get into specifics, let me underline that this was not an easy process. The list went through a lot of iteration and experiments until it got to where it is, so allow me to walk you through the whole process of how we got here to get a better appreciation for each and every card that we have. It all started with a deck profile that the legend Earthpower posted more than 13 years ago on a deck called Ballom Swap. The concept of the deck was to take full advantage of Gajirabut the Vile Centurion's ability to put opponent's shields directly into the graveyard and use Soul Swap to reapply this ability, slowly wiggling down the opponent until you can deliver the final blow. And of course, since Gajirabut is a demon command, you can fit Ballom into the deck. Although fit is putting it generously, I think the better term to use would be shoehorning, because Ballom itself doesn't really do anything to help with the deck's main game plan. It's sort of there because it's cool, not because it's an actual helpful card. And in fact, if I recall correctly, out of all games played with this deck on Earthpower's channel, I don't think the Ballom deck was summoned once. So even for its time, that deck was nothing more than just a jank tier meme level pile that you could sort of play against other bad decks, but that's pretty much it. By no means was it competitive back then, and for sure it's not even close to competitive by modern standards. But there is some method to the madness. Maybe, just maybe, there is some hidden potential out there waiting to be discovered, so I started building on it. And after some time I eventually ended up with this version, which is better. It's 40 cards and I cut down on a lot of the junk cards, but it still felt incredibly underwhelming. Like, I bumped it up from tier 5 to tier 4, but that was not enough to call the deck good. So I wanted to get some external feedback on it, and of course I enlisted the help of the IDC community. And among all the interesting takes, some more sane than others, there was the suggestion from, in my opinion, one of the goats of modern DM, Spalding, who just said, I would cut water. And at first this sounds counterintuitive because the card draw helps the deck a lot, and Emerald plus Surfer provide excellent anti-aggro defense, but maybe some of that card draw could be accounted for with cards like Charmeleon and Terrahorn, and maybe some of that defense could be covered by a combination of more triggers and Bloody Skeetos. And so I ended up on this version. One thing that became clear pretty quickly though is that without the card draw there's no way to sustain Poisonous Mushroom plays, so those had to be swapped out for Fairy Lives, which is something people also suggested on the IDC server. But the deck still felt weak. Again, it's been bumped up another tier, but that only put it from a tier 4 to a tier 3, which is not good enough for my ambitions. The two main issues were not having enough darkness creatures to build a Ballom resilient board, and losing the card draw from water made it much harder to play the value game. But there is one card that could fix both those issues, and that was Baraga, Blade of Gloom. This creature lets us take a shield back to our hand, which is essentially card draw, and in fact, hold on a second, this deck runs 16 shield triggers, so instead, why not run Benzo, the Hidden Fury? And this was the final missing piece. Benzo is the same as Baraga, except it's 2000 power weaker, but in exchange, it allows you to immediately use shield trigger abilities if you hit them, which is just fantastic. As soon as I added Benzo to the deck, it just felt like magic. It feels like by itself, Benzo elevated the deck by yet another tier. And another card I decided to add on a whim was Trog's General of Destruction, which is probably the card that surprised me the most in practice. It's widely regarded as a bad card, which by itself it kind of is. The effect is decent, but at 7 mana you're just paying too much for it. The thing is, because of Soul Swap, you don't have to pay 7 mana for it. You can get it for 3. And all of a sudden, at half the cost, the effect becomes much more devastating. Plus the fact that it's a beefy double breaker is probably more relevant in this deck than most. And that's how we ended up with this deck. For the nature section, we have Bronze-Arm Tribe and Fairy Life to help you ramp up. We have Soul Swap for obvious reasons, a Rumbling Terrorhorn and Charmeleon to play the value game, and finally, for the nature section, we also have Terra Dragon Archi de la Serna to act as a safeguard against this card, especially since it can easily be searched up by these two. And for the darkness section, we have Bloody Skeeto to help with the defense, we have Benzo, the cog that makes the deck work, the one Trox that we just talked about, then we have Locomotiver and Terror Pit for our defensive shield triggers, Gajira Boot to help us slowly wiggle down the opponent, Photoside to act as an extra demon command and to counter many of the light-based decks that are currently run in the IDC meta, and last but of course by no means least, Ballom, Master of Death, that late game punch that can clear board and end duels. As for potential future improvements, well, overall I'm happy with where the deck is at, but one thing I would maybe take a look at is this Terrahorn plus Charmeleon package. I wasn't sure which of these cards would be better, as they each have their upsides and downsides, so I decided to include 2 of each to test it out for now, but I can definitely see the ratios changing over here. And I would definitely like to include 1 more Benzo and 1 more Trox, but I can't really make them fit. Maybe taking out 1 Photoside is a correct meta call depending on what you're expecting to face, and maybe even taking out 1 Bloody Skeeto if you don't expect to run into too much aggro. Alas, this was it, duelists. The fruits of my labor, this IDC49 3rd place Dark Nature Balloon Swap mid-range list. I hope you enjoyed the story time and the deck profile. I hope you are as excited about this deck as I am, and I will see you next time. Take care.